The push to confirm conservative judges, how the administration and Senate Majority Leader are working to fill benches before 2020, divisions over how to deal with anti-Semitism on Capitol Hill, the latest on a House resolution to fight hate, and the fight to lower drug prescription prices in America. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Republicans move to confirm the president's federal court nominees. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Well, this has long been one of President Trump's top priorities. And with more than 30 judges confirmed at the circuit court level and 2 Supreme Court justices now on the bench, he is reshaping the country's judiciary.
But more than 130 court vacancies still need to be filled, so the Senate's preparing to go nuclear and clear the way for a quicker confirmation process.
That is mindless obstruction.
Mitch McConnell is considering pushing the button on a rule change as the only way to fill lower court spots before the end of President Trump's first term in office.
We've had a number of discussions about the level of obstructionism we're experiencing here.
Democrats taking a hard line and delaying nominees have achieved mixed success.
A vote to confirm this nomination is a vote to end protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions.
Circuit Court nominees Chad Riedler and Allison Rushing face a final vote this week.
Well, your early ratings raise questions about your values.
Naomi Rao, on track to replace Brett Kavanaugh on a key appeals court, met controversy over college writings about date rape and her views on abortion.
Not that all these jobs aren't important, but the longer the name of the job, sometimes the further down the list it is.
But lower-level nominees remain in limbo, with Senate Republicans contending Democrats are stonewalling nominees to keep the administration from functioning.
It's outrageous. It has to stop.
Republicans are prepared to change the Senate rules without Democrats.
In the absence of that, it's still my desire to try to achieve that.
The rule change is a two-way street, affecting Republicans if and when they lose the majority. But they appear prepared to take that risk.
This process is being abused. Everybody knows it.
For more now, we turn to Thomas Jipping of the Heritage Foundation. Thomas, you run the foundation's judicial tracker. Can you tell us how the confirmation of judges compares to past administrations?
Well, Democrats in the Senate are using a variety of tactics to try to slow down the overall process. So President Trump is making nominations at a much faster pace than previous presidents, and the Judiciary Committee is holding hearings at a faster pace, but confirmations by the full Senate are actually below average. So the Senate is off to a good start this week. They've confirmed a couple of Court of Appeals nominees and will do so, another one today. But there's a lot of judicial vacancies, and there's a lot of nominees that are pending and waiting for Senate action.
Thomas, you recently wrote about what you call the unprecedented Democratic obstruction against Trump's judges. How is that obstruction playing out?
Well, as I said, they're using a variety of tactics to slow down the process. The level of opposition to Trump nominees is setting records. The requirement that the Senate take a separate vote just to end debate, which they have to do before they can even vote up or down on confirmation, that's setting records. And, you know, it's showing in the final results. There are almost 40 nominees that are waiting on the full Senate's, what we call the executive calendar. That's the list of nominees that have come out of committee, and they're waiting for Senate action. And, you know, 16% of the federal judiciary is empty. We're in the longest period of triple-digit judicial vacancies in 25 years. And that's not good for the judiciary, and it's not good for the people who need the courts there, you know, to do their business. So the nominees are there. The need is great. but the obstruction is really serious.
Thomas, Politico is out with a report suggesting Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is preparing to change Senate rules to allow judicial confirmations with just a simple majority vote. How do you think this will shape McConnell's legacy with regard to getting judges on the bench?
Well, there have been a lot of changes to Senate rules by Democrats and Republicans over the last number of years. What Senator McConnell is considering doing is trying to limit the amount of time after the Senate votes to end debate, they can continue to debate. And so Senator McConnell believes that that is being abused, and he wants to try to limit that time so that you can basically get to an up or down vote. And, it's kind of complicated as to what the options are for doing that. I think the bottom line, though, is we shouldn't have to take steps like this. Traditionally, Democrats and Republicans have cooperated to schedule these votes, vote any way you want, and we shouldn't have to go to these extraordinary measures just to have a fair and efficient process.
Yeah, Thomas, in 2016, of course, one thing President Trump campaigned heavily on were the judicial nominees in the Supreme Court. Do you think we'll see that again in 2020?
Without a doubt. I think President Trump's judicial nominees so far have been very consistent, and they've been the kind of judge that I think our system of government needs. They've been impartial. They don't have a political agenda. They take the law as it is instead of trying to change it. That's the kind of judge we need, and he's showing by the nominations that he's been making. And that's very important, or it should be, to all Americans, because our system doesn't work unless we have the different parts of that system, including the judiciary, working the way they were designed. So he's had great success so far. I hope Republicans and Democrats, for that matter, cooperate to fill some of these judicial vacancies, and I'd expect it to be an important issue in the future.
It definitely was a motivator for voters in 2016. Thomas Jipping, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, the House is moving to condemn anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. A resolution which was supposed to be introduced yesterday was delayed as some Democrats called for broader language. The measure now targets anti-Semitism as well as Islamophobia and other forms of intolerance, but stops short of naming Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, whose anti-Semitic comments were the catalyst behind the resolution.
I don't believe it was intended in any anti-Semitic way. But the fact is, if that's how it was interpreted, we have to remove all doubt, as we have done over and over again. I thought the resolution should be enlarge the issue to anti-Semitism, anti-Islamophobia, et cetera, anti-white supremacist, and that it should not mention her name, because it's not about her. It's about these forms of hatred.
And although this resolution doesn't name Omar, just a few weeks ago, anti-Semitic tweets from the freshman Congresswoman were officially condemned by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leadership.
Well, support for impeaching President Trump is growing among Americans. A new poll finds 42% say they think President Trump should face impeachment. That Monmouth University poll is up from 36% in November. The rise comes as Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib says she'll file a resolution to impeach the president against the wishes of Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
If we don't hold impeachment proceedings today, start them today and hold him accountable to following the United States Constitution, think about that.
Pelosi and other Democratic leaders say it's too soon to talk impeachment. They prefer to wait and see what turns up from the House investigations.
And CBN News chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. David, let's start with this reworked resolution. I know you've been digging through it and found a lot. But, this is really, it's driving a huge wedge between these Democrats.
Yeah, and it's just the beginning. For Nancy Pelosi, talk about, as we've always said here, an Excedrin moment. She's going to be at CVS quite a bit in the next year and a half. This is the resolution right here. And when I looked through it, 14 references to anti-Semitism, 7 references to anti-Muslim bigotry is what they call it. Some references in there to Islamophobia as well. So look, what started out as an anti-Semitism, it should have been 14-0, right, as they say in the scorecard. But instead, it's about double compared to the anti-Muslim stuff. So look, it's watered down, and the problem here for Nancy Pelosi is that she has to deal with Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib. She has the gavel. Nancy Pelosi has the gavel. They have the power. That's the difference.
So it was just about a week, 2 weeks ago that the House passed a resolution on anti-Semitism. Here we are again a week, 2 weeks later. What does that signify about the House?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you've got a divide between moderate Democrats who are just not going to stand for this, and even some progressive Democrats who are not happy, and this new up-and-coming progressive wing of the party. So I think that's why it's going to be around for a long time. But also, let's make no mistake, Ilhan Omar will be back in the headlines. You can have me on if you'd like. You can book me for Faith Nation. Right now, I'll be back in a month, 2 months, 3 months, but I guarantee you we'll be talking about this again and again. And that's when Nancy Pelosi has to figure out, are you going to, like you were saying, Jenna, the other day, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, is she going to lose her seat on that one? Steve King, the Republican, he had his seat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Iowa. They removed his seat. Right, Iowa. They removed his seat on the Republican side. We'll see if Nancy Pelosi does the same.
Another issue that we'll be talking about for some time is impeachment. You saw there Representative Rashida Tlaib. She's calling for proceedings to begin. David, and we saw that poll that John was mentioning as well. Impeachment seems to be, the idea of it, becoming more popular among a lot of Americans. Do you think this will move Democrats to go ahead with proceedings, or will they wait like a lot of people, like the Nancy Pelosi's of the party, want to do, and wait and see what Robert Mueller comes up with in his report?
Yeah, they want to wait for Robert Mueller for sure. This is the old guard, right? The Pelosi's, the Hoyers, and a lot of these chairmen. They want to wait. They want to take it slow. They want to see what the political fallout could be, to see if they go too far left will not be a good thing. Then you have the progressives. We've talked about them, right? They're just like, let's go right now. It's the teenager, if you will, saying, you know, I want everything right now. And so that's the debate, or that's the schism between the two. I will say this, that you've got to be careful, because Gerald Nadler and Maxine Waters, two very important House committee chairmen, have both said they're okay. They see obstruction of justice charges here for sure for this president. So do Democrats actually want to impeach the president? Yes, but they're going to have to go much slower than they really would like to.
Real quick question for you before we leave. We've got the fallout over Ilhan Omar's comments, anti-Semitism comments. We've got proceedings for impeachment. We've got progressive policies that are being pushed. This seems to be overshadowing the unifying Democratic message that they had that helped them win the midterm elections. How does that spell for 2020? It's
a real problem. Healthcare, they need to be talking about healthcare. It worked for them in the midterm elections. It's not working now, and I don't think it's going to work in the future, because all of this, like you just mentioned, is going to supersede the healthcare message. So I think that is a problem. But I will say this, the Democrat candidate, whoever is going to be the presidential candidate for the Democrats, has to be able to take those progressives and rein them in as much as he or she can. And that will be the key as to whether or not they can win in 2020.
All right. David, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the U.S. deficit in trade in goods hit the highest level ever last year. That's despite a push from the president to close the gap between imports and exports. For more now, we turn to White House correspondent Ben Kennedy. Ben, help us break it all down.
Well, John, turns out exports slowed as the global economy cooled off. In China alone, the trade deficit grew to a record high in 2018, jumping nearly 12% to $419.2 billion. So we're talking about pretty big numbers here. And to explain what this means for you and for me, I spoke to Dan Celia of Financial Issued Stewardship Ministries. Take a listen.
It means a couple things. Some of it is good in the sense that our economy was growing. We saw great GDP growth last year. Remember, we were importing more goods because of that. We were importing and exporting more goods because of coming tariffs. So tariffs were coming. Some were already in place. Some were coming. They were trying to get that done before the tariffs hit. So the numbers of imports, numbers of exports increased as a result of that. So there's some negative, and don't forget that cost increased because of the tariffs that had to be added on. That added to the bottom line of the deficits that we've had for a very long time. So all of that added up to a very big trade deficit.
Now, Dan, what do you say to critics that blame President Trump? They say, look, President Trump's tariffs against China are to blame for this increase.
Well, I think, first of all, they're not seeing the benefits. And the benefits are unbelievable in the sense that no one has been willing to talk to a communist regime about these trade issues and just the one-way street that we've been dealing with China on 15 years. And the president is the first one that stepped up to the plate and said, hey, look, you guys are not a developing economy anymore. That is for certain. And all of the special kinds of deals that we were making are kind of out the door right now. You don't need those. You don't deserve them. And we've got to have a fair trade. We can't take all of your goods and you take none of our goods, which is basically what has happened.
Best case scenario, if China does agree to U.S. trade demands, will the trade deficit fall immediately, or will it take a bit of time to kind of even out?
Yeah, it's probably going to take about 2 quarters before it starts getting back to normal.
Now, Dan told me he hopes to have some sort of a trade deal with China by the end of the month. He also says the U.S. needs to juggle more than one country and focus on trade with Europe, Japan, and even South America. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Fallout from America's opioid epidemic as a leading pharmaceutical company faces bankruptcy. That story when we come back.
Purdue Pharma, maker of the painkiller OxyContin, is considering filing for bankruptcy. And after thousands of lawsuits claim it played a major role in America's opioid epidemic.
As Lori Johnson reports, many drug addicts, they started out taking prescription painkillers, opening the door to more deadly drugs.
An estimated 3/4 of heroin and fentanyl addicts first became addicted to prescription painkillers like OxyContin. That includes former paratrooper Matt Gossard, who received prescription painkillers after an injury from a parachute jump. Like millions of others, Matt got hooked on the pills, and when the prescription ran out, turned to painkillers' cousin, heroin.
Because it's almost the same thing, except for heroin's just stronger, and it's cheaper, and it's more available, which is the scary part.
That was in Ohio. In nearby West Virginia, Elaine Vance also started on painkillers, then switched to heroin.
I remember doing the first time I ever done heroin. I remember thinking, this might kill me. I may die.
In 2017, more than 47,000 people died from overdoses involving opioids, including prescription painkillers, heroin, and fentanyl. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is one of thousands to sue Purdue Pharma and others, alleging company execs knowingly concealed the dangers of opioids.
We had a number of pharmaceutical companies that developed pain meds, and they were pushing those out. And they were telling the doctors, these are not very addictive. Turns out they are very addictive.
Filing for bankruptcy protection would stop the lawsuits and would let a judge supervise negotiations between Purdue Pharma and those suing it. In a statement, the company said they are deeply concerned about the opioid addiction crisis and is proud of the actions we have taken to ensure opioids are prescribed appropriately, increase access to the overdose antidote naloxone, and fund youth education programs warning of the dangers of opioids. Every day, more than 130 people in the U.S. die after overdosing on opioids. Matt could have been one of them, but like Elaine and many others, discovered a way out.
I believe that Jesus Christ is the only answer. I believe that there is no other answer other than Christ.
I started getting to know Jesus, and I realized that the same power that rose him from the grave is what fights addiction.
The treatment that works many times has a faith-based component part to it.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, a majority of Americans say they are okay with more government regulation if it means cheaper prescription drug prices. A new survey from Kaiser Family Foundation finds 88% agree with two Trump administration proposals that could lower the cost of prescriptions, one requiring drug companies to include list prices in their ads, the other making it easier for generic version drugs to get to the market. 86% want the government to negotiate prescription prices for those on Medicare, and 76% want to place a limit on out-of-pocket drug costs for those on Medicare.
Coming up, how hogs are helping to power homes.
Well, two leading companies are turning to farmers to help find a way to create natural gas. Smithfield Foods and Dominion Energy have teamed up for a project called Manure to Energy.
As Mark Martin shows us, the goal is to turn waste into natural gas to produce power.
While it may sound like a stinky proposition, some of the world's biggest names in hogs and energy say it's far from that. In fact, to Smithfield Foods and Dominion Energy, converting hog manure to natural gas for powering homes and businesses has a sweet smell of success.
We think it's a lot simpler, and we think it will change the face of how manure is handled and turn into energy going forward.
We've really made a commitment to looking at new sustainable sources of energy. We do a lot of solar, a lot of wind. And, you know, in the last year or so, we discovered renewable natural gas.
So how does it work, turning this waste into energy? Often called biomethane, renewable natural gas is pipeline quality gas that comes from organic matter like hog waste. CBN News went to North Carolina to tour Circle K2 Farms, a Smithfield pilot project.
Manure actually is a positive thing. It creates value and it helps fertilize crops. It helps produce energy. It's not a bad thing. We view manure as an opportunity.
Craig Westerbeek explains how the process moves from the hog buildings to this huge covered lagoon called a digester.
The product, natural gas, is actually a product of a digestion of the solids by bacteria. So for that reason, it's called digestion.
The manure is funneled under this large plastic cover, and it's mixed over and over. Bacteria breaks it down, producing what's called biogas, which causes the cover to bubble up. That gas is 65% natural gas.
The biogas produced at farms like this then moves through gathering pipes to facilities like this one. That's when Dominion Energy steps in.
Where we come in, you see this plant back here, we're going to lend our engineering expertise to create a process that's as efficient as possible in creating clean, renewable natural gas that customers can use.
This facility is known as the gas upgrading system. It's here where the natural gas from the farm is refined. When it leaves here, it is 99.1% natural gas. It then enters a pipeline and is funneled to homes and businesses.
Smithfield Foods and Dominion Energy have formed a joint venture known as Aligned Renewable Natural Gas. Initial stages involve 93 farms built in North Carolina, Utah, and Virginia. Aligned Renewable maintains the first 4 projects will produce enough energy to reliably power about 14,000 homes. This would also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions equal to removing nearly 120,000 passenger vehicles from the road. Even though Dominion is a proponent of solar and wind energy, Childress acknowledges they're not the most reliable.
The thing about solar and wind, as great as they are, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. Renewable natural gas is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The two companies are backing up the talk with dollars, investing at least $250 million over the next 10 years. This project involves partnering with local farmers like Dean Hilton, who's been raising hogs for nearly 15 years. He calls it the wave of the future.
After meeting with Craig on the site, the trial site, we realized that there's a lot of opportunity in the fact that we can actually reduce our manure in our current lagoons, as well as turning the solids, the new solids, into renewable energy.
Westerbeek admits turning manure into renewable natural gas is fairly expensive.
You have a an investment in the digester like you see in the background, and then the gathering pipelines to gather the gas from different farms and bring it to a central location. And then one of the more expensive parts of this is actually cleaning the gas from its form as a biogas from this digester into pipeline quality natural gas.
Both he and Childress, along with their bosses, believe it is a worthy investment leading to clean energy plus economic benefits for their companies, rural America, and the general public. Mark Martin, CBN News, Duplin County, North Carolina.
Well, thanks for joining us for Faith Nation.
Have a great night.